Call on Members' Order of the Day number 2.
Our Work, Our Future Bill, first reading.
Mr Speaker, I move that
Andrew Little.
I move that the Our Work, Our Future Bill be now read a first time, and I nominate the Government Administration Committee to consider the bill. Mr Speaker, this is a landmark occasion. It's the first time that I can find in the history of this Parliament that a Leader of the Opposition has not only had 2 bills drawn from the Members' Bill process, but that both bills are before the House at the same time. And this House has been very generous in, so far, by majority, supporting the Healthy Homes Guarantee Bill, and I'm sure that the same spirit of cooperation and collaboration will apply in relation to this bill as well. Mr Speaker, this bill continues the golden thread of all Labor members' bills, and that is a thread of fairness and opportunity. Not for us, the complex, technical, kind of law reform measures that are properly the province of the executive, but sometimes members get prevailed upon, obviously, to introduce that type of legislation through this process. And I know there will be some members hanging out for the private international law choice of law and tort bill. It's a debate. Well, personally I am. Looking forward to that debate because it is a very important area of law. But Mr Speaker, this bill is simple in form and deed. It amends a document called the Principles of Government Procurement and the Government's Rules of Sourcing, and it amends these principles by adding 2 more considerations. First, choosing a winning bid for a government contract on its ability to create jobs in New Zealand. Right. And what could be more important than a small, very important, nurturing country and economy like ours, that the government should take a lead in ensuring that its decisions, particularly its procurement decisions, are there to promote job creation in New Zealand. And the second consideration that must now be taken account of is that government organisations develop procurement processes so that companies focused on creating jobs in New Zealand have a fair chance of winning contracts. This bill is about New Zealand. This is about supporting the great country that we are. This is a bill for New Zealand. It's about making sure that our government supports talented, skilled and creative New Zealanders and the businesses that they own and run when the government gets to make procurement decisions. That's what it's about. It's very fair, it's not arduous, it's not onerous on the government or on any other process. Here's the thing. The government spends roughly $40 billion a year on goods and services. But the reality is that too many New Zealand businesses and companies are missing out on the opportunity to be part of that government contracting. And so we saw just a few years ago the tragedy that was Kiwi Rail under its then management going overseas to source rolling stock that for decades had been fabricated here in New Zealand. And the price we paid for that was the loss of skilled, talented engineering workers at the Hillside workshops in Dunedin. And what we then actually had was, when the rolling stock landed here in New Zealand from its offshore source, then required considerable remedial work, funnily enough done by New Zealand workers, for that rolling stock to actually be used. Now, all of that could have been short-circuited, and we would have retained well-paid jobs, good, talented New Zealanders in those jobs if the tender had gone to the Hillside workshops in the first place. There is another example, and it's the IRD computer system. So a project now running, as I understand it, at roughly $1.9 billion. The IRD went out, putting together its sort of tender process, and insisted as a condition that it had to be a large company with sort of massive sort of conglomerate style approaches to its work. But the truth is that we have the IT talent and expertise here in New Zealand that, with a little bit of creative effort and energy on the part of those in charge of the procurement process, could have put together an appropriate joint venture, a cohesive bunch of New Zealand suppliers and companies that could have done the job. But that didn't happen. And so this, Mr. Speaker, is about this Parliament saying to those who run the procurement processes and those who set up its rules that we want the government to make sure that front and centre of those procurement decisions and those procurement processes is the ability for talented New Zealand companies to participate in them, and not setting up processes and not having principles and elaborate documents that have the effect of excluding New Zealand businesses and companies. This, Mr. Speaker, as I said before, is about New Zealand. And it is about New Zealand in a world that is more competitive, that is getting harder to get by in. And it is about a bill for a country that has a track record of creating and developing incredibly skilled and talented people who are in demand around the world. Well, if only they were in demand here by their own government, what a difference that could make. Mr. Speaker, this is about New Zealand's economy and our ability, through the very simple mechanism and device of the government when it spends its money, giving priority to New Zealanders, the people who pay their taxes to the government to provide them with security and certainty and prosperity. And we've seen examples around the world when good quality, solid government procurement processes work well, that we create amazing companies, or governments that do it, create amazing companies that then become world players. That is the origin of many, of the big defence contractors in the US. Without a government that was focused on what was right for that country and its businesses and its people, we would not have Boeing supplying aircraft, 757s, for example, that can take politicians around the world. So, Mr. Speaker, this is about saying to New Zealand companies, this is an opportunity for the members opposite, actually, and this government to say to New Zealanders and New Zealand companies, we back you, and we are going to support you. And we take New Zealand business seriously and say that when we come to spend our $40 billion, we are going to give you a chance to show us the excellence and the talent and the skills of the New Zealanders that you employ, and do good things for the New Zealand government too. Because ultimately, when great New Zealand companies, excellent New Zealand companies, get the chance to tender and get work for the government and display their talents and skills, it's not just good for the government, it is good for every New Zealander. Mr. Speaker, this is about supporting New Zealand, supporting our economic base, supporting our people. It is about making sure that New Zealand companies, the entrepreneurs who set them up, who are trying to do the best for New Zealand, who want to create the job opportunities for New Zealanders, who want to pay decent wages because it's skilled work that they're offering, they get a chance to get the work that the government needs that requires that skilled and talented labour. This is a great opportunity, Mr. Speaker. This is a great opportunity for New Zealand. But most importantly, it's a great opportunity for the members opposite to do what every member of Parliament is morally obliged to do, and that is act in the best interests of all New Zealanders. And if they've kind of been instructed from their research unit and their ministers, knock this over, I just prevail upon those members and their good conscience to do the right thing for all New Zealanders, for the businesses in this country, the companies, the talented workforce that they've got. Think about those who are struggling to get work. Think about those businesses that are struggling to get the opportunity. Think about the talent that sits behind them. Think about the opportunity that this provides to create that springboard that can create the next Microsoft, the next great New Zealand-oriented company, the next Weta Workshop, the next whatever it is, the next Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. This is the opportunity here today in this House to do the right thing, to generate great jobs, to generate great wealth for all New Zealand, so that every New Zealander can look up at their government and say, at last, a government with a set of rules and a set of guidelines that gives us all a chance and gives this country a chance to be prosperous, but most importantly, to give Kiwis a fair go.
The question